That's good. Yeah, that's better. Okay, good. Good. Let me do one more adjustment just to see if I can level this up slightly. All right, now I see your comments and I'm not going to have to learn how to read sideways, which is helpful. All right, thanks for being here. Let me bring this up and say hi. Hey, Carolina or Carolina, your videos are the best. I'm blessed I got through your channel. Regards from Mexico. That's awesome. Welcome. Joe's in the UK. Welcome. Catherine, New Hampshire. Michelle, yes, that's better. And Bruja says hi. And Raki, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Hi from Canada. I've been dating someone and all his amazing connection is great. However, he's still working on his career business and he doesn't take much action. Should I take a break? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure lots of people can relate to that. I'll get to that. Amy Hay from Ladera Ranch, California, Orange County. Welcome. Yes, so you've got a question here about whether you should take action. So you may have heard me make this distinction, but if you haven't, I'm just going to share it because it can be useful. So I sometimes talk about the difference between lovership and partnership. And one of the differences, I think, is that when a guy or woman or anyone is up for partnership, there is a kind of different level of investment that people are willing to make. And sometimes what that means is, a lovership, one version of a lovership can be, when I'm in your area, let's hang out, or when I have some time, let's hang out. And that can be different than, I'm going to be consistently making time to hang out and have us enjoy each other's company. So it might be worth just clarifying with this guy, like, what's his actual vision for his relating? And does he imagine that the investment or the time that he's got available right now is actually for a partnership style of relationship? Because it can be good just to kind of get clear about that and sort of take the difference off the table, so that you know where you guys both stand. And one little caveat with that, sometimes we're not great at actually discerning what we're available for. So if I think of myself as good partner material and you say, hey, are you available for partnership? I might say yes to that because I'm actually not fully aware that in this cycle, I perhaps don't have the availability for it, but I'm not aware of that. Or, and this can sometimes be challenging, I don't actually have that availability in the context of our dynamic. And that can be hard to hear, but it might actually be what's real, right? So sometimes we have to deal with the potential of learning that, actually this connection here isn't one that's gonna sustain and up level into more energy and connection. Welcome if you've just joined us. Feel free to say hi. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know if you've got a question that I can help with. Clodagh, hi Jack, good to see you. Hope everything's well in Ireland. Yes, you should. Been there, done that. Got it. Yeah, let me know if you have a question. I'm also curious how you guys are doing. Jack, I just want to say thank you for your videos. You've helped me so much tuning in from Portland. You're welcome. Thanks for tuning in. How is it in Portland? I know you were on the news a lot last year with the wildfires. I hope it's been a bit of an easier ride. Viv from South Africa, welcome. Emma, greetings from Los Angeles, welcome. Rebecca, hi from Graz, Austria, welcome. Hello, Mrs. Butterfly, Polish living in the UK. Kiara, hope I'm saying that right. Hi, Jack from London, welcome. All right, so what's your burning question? I'm curious if there's something that is up for you right now or that you've been struggling with or want to get some perspective on or want to get some input. Maybe there's a situation that you've got. Maybe there's something that's been on your mind or heart. Jennifer, hello from Ohio, welcome. Portland is so much better. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I'm good to hear. That's good to hear. Hopefully we can get a little bit more support for tackling what we need to tackle with wildfires. Hi from California, Hope, welcome. If you're joining us after the event, thanks for being here. And my quick pitch to you is if you do have a question that you would like me to answer, get in there, because who knows, but my experience with these live streams is it takes a little bit of a while for people to get their questions going, and then suddenly there's more than I can potentially get to. And if you've got something that you kind of want some help with right now, I would love to see if I can help you. Hope-California. Yeah, you're welcome. um, Rebecca says, I'm finding it very difficult to maintain no contact. Yeah, 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 that can be incredibly hard. You're not the only one with that. Um, so, a few things just in case they're relevant to your situation. So, I've coached a bunch in this area, and sometimes when we actually dig into no contact, it's not really been no contact in the way that you might think of no contact. And partly that's because exactly what you're saying. It's hard. It can be really hard. It can be excruciating. It can be almost like overwhelming. So, I've been there, totally know that, I get that. Um, Sometimes what is missing when I dig into it is a real declaration that this is what you're actually doing. Because sometimes no contact is happening because I'm doing it from my side, but I've never really, in a just a very simple and direct way, said this is what I'm doing, and this is what I need, right? So ideally, no contact's easier when the other person is playing ball. At our best, we don't need the other person to play ball because we're actually not in contact, so we don't really know whether they're trying to reach out to us, So that's where it's cutting people off, so to speak, on social media. I'm a fan of letting them know that you're doing it, and finding a place within you, if you can, where it's not coming with a sort of screw you energy. It's actually, this is something I need. This is like, either I get that this isn't going somewhere and I'm asking you to let it go and I'm trying to let it go as well. Or there's can sometimes be a worthiness or deservingness in there, right? Like, I actually want something that's more than this, and I'm going to take a stand for that. And this has also come out in my coaching. If you get that, when the guy really gets that, if he's not wanting to be available for the thing that you're really wanting, then it might actually be in your best interests that he lets you go, right? So there's also a kind of leadership there. So if the guy is kind of keeping you on the end of the yo-yo, right? Because sometimes, and I don't even need to make that malicious, sometimes it's like, yeah, there is just a connection here. There is a strong physical connection or spiritual connection, and maybe it's not right for an actual ongoing relationship, but there's something here. And sometimes the guy just, pops in and pops out and maybe doesn't realize what an impact that's having in your world. Or maybe, and I've seen this as well through my coaching, you might be so focused on, well, he's the one that breaks no contact because he does this sort of in and out act, that it's never forced you to fully do the work on your end, because you're like, well, he's going to come back at some point, or you can't even go no contact with this guy because he's so persistent. He reaches out through friends, he stalks me on social media, and it's worth just noticing, well, what's here on my side of the fence? What can I control? I can't necessarily control that he might try and reach out through a proxy, but what I can do is from my side, look at the times when I'd be most likely to want to reach out and notice, is there something else that I could be doing that might serve me, which might be finding connection in another form. It might be I have to sit a little bit and stew in my own experience and befriend my own experience more. It can be a kind of inner work practice, and it can just be really difficult, and sometimes there's a time where it's like, what, actually, it's easier right now to kind of have this sort of in-out lovership going on, and it meets some of my needs. And until I actually get clearer that I'm willing to let meeting of some of those needs go, to have a period of time where maybe fewer of my needs are met in the short term, then maybe I'm going to keep engaging in it. The other thing you can look at is like, what's your story or narrative, right? Are you sort of in a false hope that something may become true that isn't currently true? And is there a narrative about, well, what if this is the best that life is going to give me? And so oftentimes going no contact is a real loss, right? It's a real contact ourselves with how difficult it is to let things go, how attached we are to things, how our heart yearnings are strong, and sometimes they're stronger than our willpower. So it's also important to have a little bit of compassion in here for ourselves. Like, this is difficult territory, and you may have also had the experience where, say, in the past, it's been easy to let go, but there's something about this particular connection that just kind of keeps you locked in. Maybe there's some kind of trauma bond, or there's a karmic connection. There's things that, quote, are above our pay grades that are kind of going on in the background. So if you know that you're, how should I say this? Like, sometimes we want to go to the gym, right? And we struggle to go to the gym. And you might say, you know what, it is because I'm actually struggling to exercise my will right now. And so I need to practice developing my own will. And there's sometimes where you're like, yeah, I haven't been going to the gym, but I'm just working so hard to survive or get by or get through something. So when that happens, yeah, maybe you cut yourself a little bit of slack, right? Or maybe if what you need is a substitute behavior is to, do a watch party with your friends or go to the cinema if that's allowed in your area. It's like you might allow yourself some things to do that are just better than reaching out to this person, but may not be, your best ultimate action. Maybe you just need to go eat something, or maybe you need to go reach out to a friend and say, hey, can you support me? It's kind of like developing the awareness of what you actually need and learning how to go after it and ask for it. Yeah, so there's a lot actually, as I'm kind of relaying this, that can come up in this territory. Um, all right, let me get back in here. Come on, YouTube, give me the questions. There we go. There's definitely some thumb skills here. I'm losing hope for finding love after divorce. Yeah, got it. Um, to everything a season, right? So, I know what this territory is like. It's difficult. And, it might be that you're in a season where you're sort of pre-hope, by which I mean maybe it's a season of grief and letting go and reconnecting with yourself. And, um, I've heard people joke about this, that sometimes there's something we want and we imagine that it's going to come sooner than the universe is actually available to give it to us. So there is sometimes a wisdom in not giving you love immediately after divorce, right? Because there's actually let go to life. Um, it's almost like sometimes things have to die before they can be reborn. Cycle. So gives us what we need, right? And when we're in I know what it's like, losing relationship, that it's hard to even imagine what spring. It's frightening and lonesome. It's so many things, and sometimes we're at our best when we actually come through the darkness, right? When we actually learn that in our darkest days we can abide, we can be with ourselves, that we're also frail and vulnerable and we need help and support. And in touching into those grief and grief-filled days, it's like actually there is a sunnier time on the other side, even if we don't know how long that's going to take. So sometimes the hope might not be about immediately finding a new love. It might be about appreciating some of the things you have in small and precious ways, appreciating relationships that you do have that maybe are going to stick around, whether that's friends or family, and sort of trusting that there might be a time when life offers you some shoots of new possibility, but it's not going to be completely of your choosing. And in the meantime, it's hard to make that happen. It's hard to kind of go against the grain, So in the fullness of time, if this is something that's really in your heart and path, I have no doubt that it will be there, and perhaps it will be just different and maybe better than something you've experienced before. So I trust in our evolution in that sense. Um, Thanks for the question. Yeah, don't give up. I'm going through that too. We all deserve love. When is it time to get one-to-one coaching when you struggle to forget or move on from your ex? We are still in touch on text for 1.5 years. Yeah, well, part of that may be clarifying what your intention is, individually and mutually. Are you in touch because you want to stay friendship and there's a meaningful connection? Are you in touch because there's a hope that something might rekindle? Has there been explicit conversation about that? Um, what have you tried to move on, and have you gotten support before? Um, Whether it's with me or with anyone else, I'm a fan of getting support because I think it's it can be really difficult, and if time is precious. So I even remember this when I used to have my own company where it wasn't just me, where I was employing people, and sometimes you need to take on support and investment because it just gets you quicker to somewhere that would be harder and just a more struggling path to get you there. So I don't think if you've got the resources to do it that you lose too much by engaging in some one-on-one help to see. And maybe there's a different kind of help that you need. But I have this sort of general sense that um, life rewards us for investing in certain areas. Not always immediately, not obviously. And I've also had areas of my life that have felt much less amenable to my own investment. But there's also a sense sometimes you try one thing and it's not the exact thing, but putting energy and focus and goodness into a certain domain of your life. So, and also, when I coach in this area, sometimes I'm trying to be a source of sobriety for people and just to kind of remind them of the opportunity cost of engaging in something that's not serving them, and perhaps inviting them to make commitments and declarations that they haven't fully yet, and to be a sort of steward of their self-belief whilst they're in that process. So, time is precious. 1.5 years is, in some ways, that's not a long amount of time to get over someone, but in other ways, if it's not been working for you to move on, and that part of you wants to, I would say, yeah, try getting some help. I like that you're asking that question. Jack, can you talk a little bit about dating while you have a sick parent? Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. My mother was diagnosed with cancer for the second time in January. Trying not to put dating off because of it, but it's tough. Yeah, I hear you. Um, so if you're in connection with the right person, and when I say this, I don't know where a relationship will go, right? Sometimes there's a relationship for a season, but let's say that there is a person that might want to be in connection with you at this time. It could even be that it's a lovership, right? If you're so engaged with looking after your parent, you might not actually want a full-blown relationship, but you might still want connection and intimacy. So I kind of trust that often there is something out there that matches what we want. Um, and I wouldn't be shy about communicating what's going on for you because I think the right person will get it. It sounds like it's a really, poignant time. And the other thing I would say that might be important here is, and obviously you've done work with me in the past, so I know you a little bit. When we have the tendency to work hard for the people around us, it can be really important to put some stuff in our own bucket. And if dating is occurring to you that way, like it's a good counterbalance to this sort of server helper energy that might be exactly true to you in this moment to give to someone in your family, a sick parent, it might just be that you need to have a few times in the week where you do get to blow off some steam and kind of be about you. And it might be hard for you to do that, and it might be hard for even a sick parent, depending on what's going on for them to even know and notice that, right? So I'm a fan of getting some hard commitments on the calendar for the things that we tend to deprioritize. I don't have to put, probably like you, having a shower on my calendar because I get up in the morning and have a shower. But there are other things that are much less habitful than that, and they deserve more support to make them happen. So, yeah, I think there can also be a broad approach to dating. Sometimes it's actually just about having some companionship. Maybe it's not any kind of deeper sort of physical or even deeper sometimes emotional intimacy. It's about having support and being able to process what's going on for you. So I think there are all flavors of connections that are possible, and yeah, you may be noticing, like if I just said, hey, Clodagh, I've got the magic wand right now and I can kind of wave this and we can construct this in any way that's going to really serve you. What's the answer to that? What's your best guess? Because just the more clarity you have on that, even if it's an emergent clarity, right? That you go on a few dates or you notice, oh, actually, this isn't what I want, or I want more contact or less contact. Just kind of tuning that in and then asking for it in as non-attached way as you can. It can be difficult sometimes, but I think it could possibly be an important counterbalance. That's the initial hit that I have. Feel free to ask more. I hope that was helpful. Um, Thank you. I'm single for quite some time now. I was not very successful since divorce. Yeah, well, again, I know from personal experience, this stuff is, it can be very foundationally challenging. Now, what can be beautiful about that is that it actually allows you to reconnect with, like, who am I now? Like, what's true for me now? But I think it's such a for anyone, whatever the exact configuration, when you've shared life, and then the kind of disintegration of that is just a big deal, you know. Particularly any kind of intimacy where you've really depended upon each other and shared resources and shared visions for life. So, I'm inviting a broad definition of what successful might even look like in that instance, because it might be that, yeah, life is going to give you some lighter connections, perhaps before something more serious is even what's right in your soul path. That maybe you need a little bit of time of something that's not super serious in order just to really, come to terms with who you are now and what's happened and all that stuff. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself to judge it in terms. Sometimes there's a bigger rationale. Um, Now, if there's places where yeah, I'm kind of down on myself, or I'm lacking some self belief or confidence, yeah, that might be a place to get some support. But it's heavy duty stuff, and um, yeah, it may take time and the right season for it to actually make sense. This Kierkegaard, the I think Danish philosopher, said you can't connect the dots forward, you can connect them backwards. Like, you sometimes look back and things make sense that when you live it forward, it doesn't make sense. And so, in harder moments of my own life, sometimes I just try and lean into that a little bit and say, I can't fully explain this right now. It's not super linear. It's not obvious. Maybe I feel like I'm floundering, and maybe looking back, the things that I wanted so much that aren't happening for me, maybe that's for me. Maybe that's a better path that I can't even see. So my intuition is to help you cut yourself a little bit of slack, and um, yeah, and to also own what might be important to own, even if it is that I'm finding it hard, or I don't know how to date, or I don't even want to connect, or all the connections feel superficial, or whatever the thing is. Just to really um, own that, not in a way that's not down on yourself, but that's actually like, yeah, this is what's happening for me right now, and it's a season. It's a season. So it may shift sooner than you actually think. But sometimes there's a great David Whyte poem where he's talking about, if you don't feel a sense of belonging, you have to really own the fact that you don't belong, or you don't feel like you belong, or part of you feels like you don't belong. That's the start, is to acknowledge your sense of exile, because that will have you feel more belonging when you actually acknowledge what's really here right now. So maybe there's some wisdom in that. He told me yesterday how much he appreciates my friendship. Later on, he wanted to come over, but I had other plans. Later on, he wrote, he won't tolerate my recent behavior and just started ignoring me. Interesting. Um, he won't reply my call, and I haven't said anything wrong, so I wrote him, I don't like this game, and it's a shame he chose this path. Um, I think this is manipulative. Curious. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's a very clear energy coming towards you. Um, One thing I found, and I can even recognize this in myself, or certainly more historically, that if I'm not clear about a certain connection or situation, I'm more likely to behave less well in a certain way, or I might make something a bigger deal than it actually is, or I might try and outsource responsibility and say, "Oh, well, you didn't return my text, so I'm not going to connect with you," or versus like where it's like this is something I'm really clear I want to try and pursue. I don't know where it's going to go necessarily, but I'm in for the exploration. I think the energy is different, and then I think you'll find guys that basically aren't making excuses, or if there's something on your side, maybe you're not into it, or you don't know, or you're not showing up, there's actually more patience and more consistency because it's backed by a deeper impulse versus perhaps a more superficial or kind of attraction or sexual connection. If it doesn't have that deeper resonance, then I think it's easy to be in a story on the guy's side as to why this thing isn't working out, and it might be because of something you're doing or there's something up in the connection, as opposed to actually acknowledging, you know what, I don't know what I want with this woman, or I'm not really clear that I want something that would merit her showing up more for. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes if you're getting, maybe bad isn't just the right word, but let's say unclear or in and out or withdrawn, kind of like less kingly man energy, more kind of boyish man energy in a way, it's worth noting that and maybe not buying into it too much. That's my experience. Hey, Susan, welcome. Evening, Mr. B from London. Welcome, Gina. Thank you, Jack. That's really helpful. Joe, awesome. Happy to hear that. Um, let's have a look here. Got to improve my thumb scrolling skills here. There's kind of an art to this. Purple says, Jack, I've decided to break up with my boyfriend this week, but I know there will be anger. How should I act? And what should I say to him while he's angry? If I just leave, it will be much worse. Yeah, well, sounds like some good foresight. Um, I mean, question for you, like, does he have a right to be upset, or does he have a right to be angry? Right now, I know anger can be destructive, and I know in my own experiences I can do a better or worse job with my anger, using it constructively or using it destructively. But I'm asking that question because what might be relevant is what happens for you when he's angry, and can you be with that, right? Do you, maybe you feel guilty, or maybe it brings up, other times that people have been upset with you, or maybe you're afraid, and all of that's legitimate. It's just worth asking the question, huh? What would happen if you were okay with his being angry? Like, let's just say, you know what, that's going to be, it's a natural part, even of a grief cycle, right? There's that part that's like anger. So if that's in some ways natural, maybe even healthy, and obviously, there's ways to express it, but if we just put that nuance aside for a moment, what would it be like to be able to not take it personally, right? To realize this is about him and his process, and what would it be able to take to be able to be with that, and almost to be like, yeah, give me your anger, let me hear it, I'll listen to you. Sometimes in that ability to be with someone in their anger, it's actually one of the best ways to diffuse someone's anger, because it's almost like it has a place to land. I mean, gosh, I mean, I'm even thinking, politically and so much and going on in the world right now. It means a lot sometimes to people just to say, hey, let me have your anger. You might not use that language, but it's like, I can show up. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me about your upset. Now, it might be that that's too much. It might be your anger's too much, or there's a way that you express it that triggers me, or it could be all sorts of complexities going on there. But I'm saying at its sort of simplest, that orientation, that I'm not actually trying to stop people having an experience, right? I'm not in the business of preventing your authentic experience. I'm in the business where I can of being with it. And sometimes I may have to draw my own boundaries for what I have capacity for, or I may have to say, I'm struggling to hear you right now. Could you say that in another way? Maybe we get mutually triggered and it's really difficult. And I've been in those situations, and sometimes that's just really hard and it's not obvious how to proceed with that. But if we both had a baseline agreement going in that we both have a right to be angry, where possible, we'll try to be kind. But the actual energy of anger isn't kindness in a sense, right? The energy of anger is, no, I don't like this. I don't want it happening. Stop. This is too much. And being a better friend to that in ourselves generally allows us to be with it more in other people. Now, this last bit, if I just leave it, it will be much worse. I think, if I'm tuning into this correctly, I think is relevant to what I'm saying here, because sometimes anger escalates when people leave, right? When actually there's not a place for it to land or to be heard or to be met or seen. So that might be something to play around with. And you know, when one person breaks up with another person, it's not always because they're the only one that wants to break up, right? I believe a lot in system dynamics. Normally it's a little bit more complex just than one person's into it, one person isn't. But if you're the person that has taken the initiation to break up, in some ways, you may deserve some pushback. And I don't mean that moralistically, just, yeah, you're the one that wants to change something. And so there's going to be impact. And you might have had a whole set of time to work some stuff through with you. Sometimes also the person that wants to leave a relationship is more oriented to sort of the possibility, right? Like, I want to feel better. I want my freedom. I want the things I'm missing out on, or I don't see this connection going somewhere, or you don't treat me right. And in the systems dynamic, sometimes certain emotions are going to land more heavily in one person, right? Just like there can be a pursuer and a pursued, sometimes the anger is going to sit more heavily in one person. Now, I could get judgmental about that, or I could sort of say, on behalf of the system of our relationship or our former relationship, right now the anger is more present in you. Now, that's not a normal way of talking, but you know by now I'm not really a normal person. But what I'm trying to do is almost make it a little bit more clinical, desubjectify it, so to speak, and say, yeah, sometimes the thing that the other person's left sat with, right? Maybe they're fighting for the relationship. It's almost a privilege that you don't have to do that, right? In the same way that if you go to break up with someone and they're like, well, I'm not really bothered anyway, you might suddenly find you have emotions that kick in because they're not being held in the other place. So I've been at my best sometimes when I had more curiosity about what would it take for me to be in the position of this other person, or what in our system is showing up in them right now, rather than it just sort of being like, oh, what's happening with you over there, you know. So I hope some of that is helpful. And if you need to put particular contexts around the potential for him to be angry to make it more safe, or to make it more within a capacity that works for you, then you may want to set some context, right? It might be that you can do it for a certain number of minutes. It might be you can do it if you both show up with certain agreements. It might be that it's better in person or not in person, or you have it over more than one conversation. But I'm almost saying I think there might be certain emotions that are hard to not be there. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time and advice. Really appreciate it. You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, sound is breaking up. Is that true for anyone else? I realize I'm a little behind you. This is a few minutes ago. Sorry if that is. Just walked away from a 3-year relationship, kept disappearing and returning with no apology reason. I had to take a stand as I'm tired of getting breadcrumbs. Divorced 31 years ago and gave him my heart. Got it. I'm not sure. Is that a different person? But I like that you're taking your stand in the context of what sounds like breadcrumbs and disappearing. And I just want to honor you because, again, from my coaching work in this territory, I know that it can be sometimes really hard to take a stand in those situations, because that in and out, right? In the same way in behavioral psychology, they do the experiments with feeding rats, and if they do it, intermittent feeding, it's really hard for the rat to not just keep coming back. I think part of the same circuitry exists in us in some ways, and it can be hard to break that cycle. So I just want to honor the courage that takes. Thanks for all these questions. I appreciate this. Is good food, so to speak. As long as you feel empty and jaded, I guess self-work is always the way. Because lately, I just feel I can't catch a break, like I'm cursed in a way, and I find it difficult to find the way inside again. Totally. Yeah, I hear you, and I can actually relate to that as seasons of my life where it feels like things are really in flow, and other seasons where it's like, God, I have to work so hard for every little thing, where it's like, I've had times even in the last year where just getting up and having a shower takes a level of energy that I'm sure like, isn't this a thing that just to kind of happen whilst I was like probably planning my day? Or it's like, yeah, definitely know what it's like to not feel like you can catch a break at times. And um, at my best, I try not to create a story out of that. I try just to acknowledge how hard it is. That's almost my prayer, like just know I'm finding this really hard right now. And maybe I can trust that it is going to be a season, but sometimes when it's really hard, that's even hard to trust. So sometimes I'll try and frame that as just like leadership training, even if it's just self leadership training, like life won't necessarily give you circumstances that you can't overcome or be with. And if you try and be with it and eventually you can't, there's also no shame in that, right? Like there's no shame in trying and the vulnerability of trying. So often it's easier to sort of check out from something and stop trying because it hurts to keep trying and not get results from something. So yeah, hang in there and hopefully it will be springtime before too long. Hey to Susan from Scotland. Welcome, Hazel. Good to see you. Awesome. Thank you for being here. Hello from Georgian Bay, Ontario. Welcome. All right. Hello. I was raised by a narcissistic parent. I can see that I have some problems seeing the red flags. I'm very careful now as I got very scared after starting to date again. Got it. Yeah, I do have some videos about narcissism. And, um, I'll also say this. I think there is clinical diagnosis of narcissism. And I also think the term is used more broadly these days for stuff that might not be clinically diagnosable. And what I've observed is that if different people I've interacted with, if I got them to name what they saw as narcissistic, they might actually have a different perspective on what is or who is or to what extent. And so that's sometimes just given me a little bit of a hold it slightly more lightly. Said differently, if I'm sometimes unaware of even on a long spectrum of the parts of me that other people might perceive narcissistically or they may accurately perceive narcissistic, then it's almost like I don't sometimes know exactly how clear my observation of when I'm like, well, that's narcissistic. It just gives me a little bit more humility in the label in a certain way. Like I sense that's what's going on here and I don't know. And one thing about childhood that can be useful, just as a perspective to try on, is maybe there was a part of me that was going to come in and experience my childhood in a certain way. And even if I'd had the ideal holding environment from my parents, I may subjectively still had some of that experience. Now, that's not to let narcissistic parents off the hook. It's just to say that I can reclaim some of the power of my own childhood by having some lightness in the way that I hold how the game got set up, because some of that might have been subjectively in my experience as well. And that's not to say objectively we might not say, yeah, this was a complete narcissistic parent show. That was exactly what's happening here. And obviously the impacts of that are going to be far reaching. It's just to sort of reclaim from my side, different children experience the same parents differently. And so maybe I want to just acknowledge what happened, but my most direct path to healing is going to be to look at my own relationship with narcissism and also my own relationship with what I do to enable narcissism. Because that's often the key thing. Like even personally, I've had to look at that of like, where do I go to sleep? Or where do I abide by something that's not actually okay with me? Or where does my empath get overly activated in a way that I find it hard to dial down or turn off? So I think you just said that they're high on this, quite high on the spectrum. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That sounds really rough. And I know that can also have continued difficulties about how much you have people in your life or not. Um, but it can also lead to some opportunities to look at some things in a deeper way as well. So maybe there's a little bit um, of light there, and it seems that a lot of this, in that, I'm not the I mean, I have studied psychology, but I'm not a detailed psychologist on this. Um, um, but yeah, part of the healing in this territory can be how close do I stay to my own experience when I'm in connection with other people, um, and how much can I trust myself? And obviously, that trust can get impaired by difficult experiences that we've had. Um, but anything that you do in that territory of really being able to slow down into your own trust and intuition, I think is probably a good thing. Um, all right. Trying to find a decent guy who isn't disrespectful. Okay, so again, just shooting from the hip here. I do have a video about respect and disrespect, and I take a different stance than I think a lot of what's out there on YouTube in this, because I think there is an opportunity to look at your own connection to what it means to be respected and disrespected. And that this can sometimes, in the same way that you and I could eat the same food, but we might have a different sensitivity to it. Sometimes there can be a sensitivity to the question, am I respected? Almost like it can be a preoccupying background question that my respect is a sort of stock price that can move up and down more quickly than it can for other people. And sometimes people say, yeah, of course, Jack, but like, how do you fix that? Or how do you learn how to take certain things less personally? Or how do you learn how to hold your own self-respect when people are being disrespectful? But basically, I'm inviting the possibility that you could become harder to disrespect, and that that's actually a part of claiming your power more fully. And then the dominant organizing question vis-a-vis men may not be, how do I find one that isn't disrespectful? It may be that I notice when there's more or less respect happening, but it's almost like it's less of my out front radar, and it can actually be one of many questions that you might want to hold in connection to a guy. One other way into this question is to notice, is there a part of you that can also become disrespectful if you don't feel like you're treated well? And that is not about persisting and letting people treat you badly. It's almost like it's befriending your best response in the face of disrespect so that you respect yourself, right? So if you're disrespectful to me and I start turning it into a slagging match, there's a way that I'm disrespecting myself, because that's actually not the way that I want to treat people, and it's not my highest. Now, have I been there in arguments? Of course, we're all human. But at my best, that's not the game that I'm engaged with. I might say, I'm going to disengage with you. I find this disrespectful. Or I might say, I need to be spoken to differently. And if that can't be met, I might disengage. But it's almost like, if I'm having too many conversations about how much you aren't respecting me, it's almost like I already lost the game in a certain way. Like, that's actually not the game that I want to be in. And yeah, check the video out of that. I'm basically saying this can be a portal to a deeper awakening about self-love. That's actually what I'm saying. That there can be a way I don't fully love myself because I'm so attuned to whether I perceive people are respecting me or not, that it's almost like my own self-love is in doubt. Whereas when I'm more fully assured in my own regard for myself, and I allow myself a broader palette of experiences that I still love myself through, that question about whether other people respect me or not starts to look a bit different. That's the possibility that I see, and it's not about accepting bad behavior so much as an internal shift where I use that to keep waking me up to loving myself more. Question: is it bad that I don't want to be friends with my ex? He wants us to reconnect and be friends even after my son turns 18. No anger, rancor, just living my best life. No thanks. Yeah. I don't think it's bad. I I don't know what the underlying dynamic is. My observation, just casually, is that the world seems to divide into sort of two camps: people who generally like to be friends with their ex, and people who generally find that they don't, or they find it even a strange idea. So I think you get to have your choice, you know. And if this piece is true, no anger, no rancor, it's just that's what I'm choosing, then I don't think that's a big deal. The piece here about after my son turns 18, I'm curious whether that means our son, and that would therefore be an ongoing connection. But sometimes what's right is to be friendly, but not friends, right? That actually I can be civil and courteous and hopefully mutually, but we don't necessarily need to be closer than that. Um, where that might be difficult, I guess, is if there's an ongoing difference of desire there. So we have to remain friendly because of what's in our lives together, but actually one person wants to be more friends than the other. And um, yeah, I guess the move there might be to be available for the impact for the person that wants to be more friends. Can you be available for that impact with them? Doesn't mean I have to shift what I want, but you may have had the experience when you want to be friends with someone and they don't want to be friends with you. That can feel like rejection. So maybe there's just a little bit of space there for the other experience. I spend time educating myself on toxic men and red flags and signs that help me, but sometimes the doubt creeps up if this guy will be trustworthy long term because of my bad experience. Absolutely, 100%. Like, makes total sense to me. I get it. I feel for you. And that might just be what it is in some ways. Again, sometimes, sometimes when I coach people one on one, they're in a connection, and sometimes they're not. When they're not, it can sometimes be easier to see, okay, so there's a thing called doubt, which we could call in some ways a spiritual malady, right? And again, there's other videos where I've done a deeper dive on this. But that was a real distinction when that came into my life through my work in the Enneagram world. I'd always just thought of doubt as sort of like, isn't that what the Scottish philosophers of yonderyear were trying to do? Be doubtful and skeptical and probe and ask, deep intellectual questions about reality. But if you hold the perspective that doubt as a kind of fear, anxiety that can take over, that can start to ask questions, that takes us from presence, in that perspective, I might look at doubt as my own spiritual liberation, irrespective of whether a particular guy seems to be kicking that up or not. Now, obviously, wouldn't it be great to be in a kind of connection that feels secure enough that I have less, not more doubt? That would be great. But the inner work around doubt is probably mine to do, whether I'm in relationship or not. And so that can sometimes be the power in here is my relationship with my own guidance and my intuition as opposed to my doubt. That's like years of work right there. Not in an uninspired way, just in that's real mature adult development that I don't necessarily think gets talked about. And sometimes I could pick up a newspaper and be like, okay, this is an intelligently written article. The foundation of this article, if I just was like, what's the kinesthetic, what's the energy that I get from this? It's doubt. And that's fine. You can get pretty far in the world with a worldview that's predicated on doubt. And in terms of our own, deeper inner work journeys, it's a really important thing to take a look at. So, and it develops over time, and it develops by listening to yourself and having permission to make mistakes, to not, beat up on yourself, but just to notice, okay, yeah, I actually listened too much to my doubt, or I didn't tune into my own intuition. And so taking the time to learn more about that, I think is just awesome and real, and sometimes it's difficult. Um, I'm upset, just got broken up with. I can't tell if it's me or if it's him. Lack of clarity, if he's low value or I have baggage. So frustrating. Well, in oh, losing my tripod here. In some ways, I'm pretty simple. In some ways, I'm really not. I'm high maintenance. But in some of the views I hold, I can be quite simple. So in some ways, for a relationship to continue, it takes two people that want to continue it. So if one person wants to break up, in a way, it's like we just don't have the necessary conditions. I remember as kids, they would teach us about the fire triangle, right? For a fire, we need three things. I'm probably going to forget them now. Um, but we need a flame, we need oxygen, and we need a flammable material. Hey, I remembered that. Um, in the same way with a relationship, you need at least two people that want to be on the pitch, on the board, whatever your metaphor is. Sometimes I'm in football and soccer metaphors. Sometimes I'm in chess metaphors. But you got to have two people there. So whilst it can be really painful when you want to show up and the other person doesn't, obviously that can be excruciatingly painful. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to get into the analysis of the why of that. Sometimes it's just is this guy wanting to show up for some style of more serious relationship? And if he isn't, it's kind of like, I use this binary thing, 0, 1, right? 1 is a guy that wants to play. 0 is a guy that just doesn't want to play consistently. Maybe he plays partially, maybe he plays sometimes, maybe he did play, and maybe now he doesn't play, maybe he never played. So if you're with someone who's a 0, and that 0 is can be a 0 that's generic, it can also be a 0 in terms of your connection with him. That is the most important thing to know, is to know that it's a 0. A lot of the after-match analysis is our own, it can be our willingness to want to understand, but it can also sometimes be our own, sort of overdwelling or overanalyzing, or trying to find an answer when actually there may not be an answer that's available. Or it may be the answer is available to you in hindsight. Maybe you start dating another guy and there's just a whole level of seriousness that's different. And you're like, okay, great. So it probably wasn't me. Sometimes it can just be, from an objective perspective, just to say the connection between these two people isn't going to be a 1. And a 1 doesn't mean we're necessarily together for years. A 1 might just be we have a relationship that's meaningful because we're both showing up for it. Maybe it is for a season. But there's a difference between when two people show up for something, when it's no one shows up, or just one person shows up. So I'm a fan of not trying to overanalyze those things, of just kind of keeping it simple where you can. Now, what might be difficult about that is it might bring up some insecurities, it might bring up some questions. Get support with that, process that, work with a friend, a coach, a therapist, someone that can help you with that. But I wouldn't spend too much time trying to be over there with what's going on for him, because it's 1 or 0. That's the simplest way to think about it, and what I've found. Was my first relationship after divorce. He has my whole heart but can never go back. Really battling though, trying to keep up from going into depression. Gave him everything except my body. Got it. I'm sorry that you're battling right now. Yeah. Yeah, I get this. It's kind of tricky territory, right? Where we want to give ourselves wholeheartedly, and there's something that's so beautiful about that. So I just want to honor that. Not all of us are able to, or even have the desire to, give ourselves wholeheartedly into a relationship. So that's brilliant. And it may be that there's a little part of that where you also need to, have your own whole heart for yourself, which doesn't mean that we don't give it fully into relationship, but it's almost like a both and, where it's also important that I have access to my whole emotional experience, my own tenderness, preciousness, uniqueness, and authenticity, even whilst I'm in relationship with someone else. And if I cease to be in that relationship, that part doesn't go away. It might hurt real bad for a long time, but there's still a sense that, I'm sort of, it's not like my heart fragments are just over there. I might have some reclaiming to do, but there is still a wholeness that is here, on my side of the fence. Yeah. I hope you can get some support, if you're in a tough place as well. Texting a guy for 7 months who lives 80 miles away. We're close and it's been amazing to finally meet. He's busy for the next few months. I don't know whether to continue dating others or wait for a maybe. Well, I'm curious what your intuition is. Let's put it from this perspective. If I'm the guy in this situation and I'm saying to you that I'm busy for the next few months, I don't think I have a right to ask you not to date, because I'm not making myself available for a real relationship. So from that perspective, I would say, well, why wouldn't you date? Because if your dating somehow has him less interested or not willing to come in and, step towards a relationship, I don't think he's going to be your guy to be in a relationship with anyway. So I don't think you lose too much. I think you lose more when you're waiting for a maybe, and it sort of trains you into, well, there's a possibility. And it's almost in the necessity possibility polarity. We can be hypnotized to the possibility end, and it might actually serve us to be a little bit closer to also the necessity end, which is more like the pragmatic and realistic side of things. That typically, when a guy asks you to wait, or maybe he's not even asking that, but he's busy for a number of months, that's not a guy that wants a relationship with you, right? Because you could be president of a country and still make yourself really available for a relationship. So I'm not making him wrong. I'm just saying, if I was this guy's friend, uh, my observation to him is you're not available for this, and therefore, why would you be available for it? Again, using the chess metaphor, he's not on the board, so why would you be on the board? And you might say, well, look, I want to stay sat at the board in case he comes and wants to play at some point. But as soon as he wants to play, he can let you know, and you can say, oh yeah, do you want a chess game tonight? I.e., can we go on a date? But in the meantime, I don't know that it serves you. My concern would be that it would limit you from other opportunity, and it might also challenge your own self-esteem in a sense, because to wait for something that could maybe happen, and he's not saying, look, I've got a really busy week at work, I'll call you next week. He's saying, you might not see me for months. Now, if I said, look, I really like you, and I would like to see where this might go, but let's take Cloda's example. My parents are really sick right now, and they absolutely need me. And so I'm not that available. But here's what I am available for. I'm available to talk to you 3 times a week for an hour. It's only going to be a call. I can't get together in person because I've got to go overseas. But once we've got through this cycle, I'm then going to be available to date full-heartedly. Now, that's something you could step into if you wanted to. Or a guy might say, look, I just know I haven't got my shit together right now. Sorry to swear, but that's true. So if I do get my stuff together, I'll call you, and then we can take it from there. In the meantime, you can live your life. Do you see? It's sort of like it's a different thing. It's like if you're applying for a job, at some point it's like, well, do you want me for the job right now or not? And if it's a no, I'm not just going to keep sitting outside your office every day in case you might at some point want to offer me a job. I might go and start my own business or take another job or whatever. Now, if you want to say, let's stay in touch, because we don't have a job right now, but we might in the future, I can stay in touch, but I can't just afford to not work. Do you see what I mean? Makes it a little bit clearer maybe. So I'm not a fan of waiting, because what I've seen is that it rarely gets the upgrade, just talking probabilistically, statistically as well. So it's better that it, at some point, constellates around something real. Now, sometimes that process could take years. It could be that it's not the right time for either of you for whatever reason, and eventually there is a right time, and then we can step into something more meaningful. That's what I'm interested in, is like, I'm getting the image of like, I'm getting an image of me being very inarticulate. I don't know if you're getting that image as well. I'm getting the image of cogs. You know how cogs, like a gear that just clicks into gear, and now it's actually like we've got something that's working. That's what we're looking for, like an inflection point. And we don't have to wait for it. We can just notice it if it comes, which is the equivalent of saying him like, yeah, I've got my stuff together and now I want to take you on some dates. Okay, that's news. That's something different. But me waiting, not such a fan of that. I hope that helps. All right. Thanks for all these questions. I'm loving this. I like this. Your Mr. Wonderful is somewhere out there. Go get him. I like that. I was stood up on a date last night. Made childcare arrangements, was talking through the day, and then when I got there and I called, they blocked me. Yeah, that's lame. So I apologize on behalf of any of us that have done that, or if this is a guy, I apologize. That's not great. I'm not a fan of that. Sometimes things happen, right? Sometimes you're in a car accident or you fall ill, but you can make a communication about that. And yeah, I'm disappointed hearing that, honestly. And that's not just from a place of judgment, just I think there's going to be better stuff out there for you to be engaging with. And I think it's good to just see that for what it is. You sometimes say as it starts, so it goes. And so there is something about, like, if the person can't make the first few dates or keeps canceling or is habitually over late for them, it's like that's good information, because that may be what you're actually going to be dealing with, that kind of energy. What to do when a guy didn't have a formal conversation with you regarding the future, but casually mentioned he will come back to me after a year he's done with his work school mission? Well, in an ideal world, I think you'd say good luck, and you're welcome to call me when you get back. And if you wanted to, you could mention casually, I'm going to be living my life. That bit's optional. You may just do that yourself. You may mention it. Because it's like, who knows what's going to happen in that year, Um, if he's saying like, I'm really clear, I want to build a life with you, and I'm going to come back, and we're going to move in together, and you have a level of relationship where that would be a justifiable proposition. Okay, that's something. But sometimes there's just a time where actually what is true for a guy, and it may not just be a guy, but I know it from the guy side, is like, yeah, what's true is I've got to go do this thing, right? I've got to go to battle. I've got to go travel the world. I've got to go build this business. I've got to go date people. That can just be true, but there's also a time for a guy where that isn't true. And that is generally a better place to be engaging. And so the wait for that, for a sort of casual promise, is different, I think, than a very specific and sort of thoughtful promise. Even that, I think you'd have to really think about whether that was right for you. But when people mention things casually, I tend to not think they're so real about it. If I were really real about that, sitting down, I think that would be like, I want to have a specific conversation with you. And again, it would be like, I really like this. I've got to go slay the dragon. I would love to be back in connection with you. When I've done that, or it's like, well, maybe I could even continue. Sometimes I have to go slay the dragon, but I can still be in relationship with you. So yeah, I'm not such a fan of hanging on casual words, basically, because why? I've coached a lot of people, and I've seen that when you start to piece together casual words, you can sometimes be in a narrative that is actually quite far from what's real. And I think specific, deliberate conversations and actions and consistency tend to trump all of the casual conversations. Lots of time spent on educating myself how to discern people, set boundaries. I got burnt, and I'm more careful now. Right on. Hi, Jack. Elaine from Hong Kong. 2:45. Wow. Thanks for tuning in. But I'm so excited to be able to join your live. First time. I can't thank you enough for all your videos, insight, and wisdom. Thanks. You're welcome. Thank you. I hope things have been a bit easier in Hong Kong. I do have friends in Hong Kong of Corona and lockdown and all that stuff. So hope it's going okay. Really hope Mr. Right is out there. Yeah, right on. Naresh Kumar, Naresh Scribid. Susan, I love and enjoy my own time as you need to do it for yourself. Awesome. Yes, gave this relationship everything. He had my all. Yeah. So I'll just say this, maybe it's a little bit of a reiteration. But my hope and prayer for you, again, not knowing any of the details for this, so sorry if I missed the mark, is something like, I want you and the relationship to have your all going forward. That there may be a way that it actually serves you to, and it's not about not putting your heart or protecting your heart. It's about keeping enough reverence for your own desires, needs, and contact with yourself. And that going into a relationship from that place might feel different than it has in the past. And so it's almost like if there's two pillars, we're both leaning in towards each other, rather than perhaps I'm overly lent in and then I can't fully stand back up on my own 2 feet, so to speak. Julie, hi, welcome, first time here. Come to grips with the fact that he just cannot love again. Catching up here. Question: how can I learn to enjoy both offering and receiving physical affection in a relationship? Yes, childhood trauma and confidence issues are definitely at play in my case. I'm 45. Yeah, so there's a little matrix that, if you haven't come across it, can be useful. Let's see if I can get this right. So there's giving and receiving, and then there's taking and allowing. So those are at least 4 dynamics that can happen, let's say, in the realm of physical affection. And so it can be useful just to look at those and notice, oh, which of those do I feel most comfortable with? Some of us are more comfortable giving, some of us are more comfortable taking, some of us are more comfortable receiving. And, it might be one you're like, oh yeah, actually it's really hard for me to allow, and so that's something I'm going to take aim at. And maybe in the right connection, I can actually get some support that this is something that I'm practicing, and it maybe isn't easy for me, There are There are books that are in this territory. There's one, "Come as You Are," that I think is pretty good. Stimulus. Um, a big, I mean, a big part of this is, you've talked about childhood trauma confidence. A big part of it is actually feeling safe, right? And so knowing how to ask for the things that create safety for you. Um, Part of the "come as you are" sort of line of argument is that we have brakes and accelerators. So there are things often that can be unconscious that can put brakes on our desire for physical affection or for arousal. And so there can just be a little bit of a self discovery process there of noticing, like, whatever it is, talking about work's a big turn off. Smells can be a big turn off or turn on. Um, Not feeling emotionally connected is a big thing for people. So, what has us feel more emotionally connected? So, in an ideal world, we would be able to support each other in this way, you know. And sometimes it's the places that I might be confidence or get triggered might also then not match the places where you would ideally have a partner that feels secure and confident in what's going on. So um, I would take it slow. I would have conversations that are not just when you are trying to be physical. So they're a little less high stakes because they're kind of happening at a different time. I would have those conversations when you are already somewhat connected. And, if we really get down to brass tacks, we could also set up physical affection in a way that feels good to her. And it could be as simple as, uh, what would you like me to do right now? Or, if I put my hand here, how does that feel to you? And you get the chance to basically just kind of be honest. It doesn't have to commit you once and for all to that being true, but in this moment, do you know what I mean? So you, in a sense, get to, this is more like, if you're going to allow certain things, you get to dial the thermostat. And just that sense of control, but also that you get to give immediate feedback, it can be quite compelling. Um, I also think just the acknowledgement, right? And this is sort of like the anti-Hollywood view of reality. For most of us, it's not easy to ongoingly always have good physical affection, right? It's like there's some things we need to learn. There's some unconscious breaks where suddenly I was into it, now I'm not. Maybe you touched me on my shoulder and actually I don't remember it consciously, but that was the same shoulder that my ex-girlfriend was touching when she wanted to leave the relationship, right? We're all going to have kind of unconscious triggers that are set up in these ways. So just permission to learn and explore, and that it's okay. That, I think, is probably almost the best thing I can offer. That, you know, everyone is basically going to have to learn to enjoy both offering and receiving physical affection in some ways in a relationship, I think. Sometimes there are relationships that are incredibly physically hot and where that stuff may not be the main presenting issue of a relationship. But often those relationships don't really go somewhere. They're more like hot loverships. They're not necessarily partnerships that, actually stabilize into a connection. So I'm never confident in either offering or accepting physical affection. I find it hard to show emotions, especially of the affectionate kind too. Yeah, so this is something that you're taking aim at, and um, maybe there's some practice territory where you get to take a few risks that might feel edgy for you, and maybe even describing to a partner, here's what I would like to be able to do. Here's what I'd like to be able to say, or here's what I'd like to be able to feel or share more. And that might be really edgy or difficult to be in contact with, but just, yeah, permission to learn. It's like, oh, yeah, who hasn't got physical hang-ups in some ways, right? Whether it's just how I perform, how I look, how people respond to me. I think, and here's, I'll also say, even from my experience, that this is sort of the Hollywood thing again, right? So the people that might not have presenting issues, sometimes it's because the way that they are in physical affection is a sort of performance. And there's not the deeper authenticity. Because sometimes when we're romantic, we're kind of edgy and we might smell a bit. It's like it's not all just manicured and I did the perfect thing and I touched them in the perfect way. And sometimes there's certain connections where it's the flow of those things is more obvious between two people, where it's like I don't actually have to really think so much about how I touch because actually it's just sort of drawn out of me. So don't be too hard on yourself, I think, is what I'm saying. And I think the right partner for you also needs to not be hard on you, and to be in your corner, and maybe you can be in each other's corner. All right, I highly recommend Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix. Yes, that's a good book. In fact, if you're interested in that book, you'll see I've got a video called, might be called Getting the Love You Want. It's just a short video where I do a very quick review of that book. And I think the book is also just linked there as well. Hi, Jack. I was wondering if you have any videos on being ghosted and how to deal with it. My confidence has took a hit, been very emotional today. Yeah, I absolutely do. If you just go to Google and type Jack Butler ghosting, you'll find a lot of stuff. Um, yeah, it can be a rough ride. I know. I think it will get easier, and I think as a society we're kind of working out more about where the kind of right protocols are here. Um, but I'm sorry that you're on the receiving end of that, because I think there are better ways to deal with it. So I'm sorry that you're receiving that. And maybe there'll be something in here for you about noticing certain signs earlier, or noticing if you're engaging with the kind of person. So if we look at it from a different way, maybe this doesn't get talked so much about in the ghosting world. My best antidote to not ghosting you is to be in my heart, right? Because if my heart is available and tender and I care, then unless there's something that's grossly wrong in my world, I should be able to extend some kind of communication to you, right? So can you notice when you are dating a guy, is this guy in his heart? Like, does he care? Is there a realness of contact? That's almost like your best insurance policy. Now, that doesn't mean the relationship's going to go a particular way. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be confounding factors, but that's something to kind of pay some attention to. And this can be really hard as a perspective to get into, but if you can get into it, it can serve you, right? You've probably heard this expression, hurt people, or it's maybe even more accurately, sometimes it's the hurt parts of people that hurt people. So ghosting, and there is a little bit of a, ghosting is an essentially contested concept. That's a fancy phrase, but it basically means there is no one universalizable of what one person would just say is it wasn't really going anywhere, or we only went on one or two dates, or we didn't even go on a date, or we were only just texting, and they don't feel like there's an obligation to sort of end it. Or there's some people who, if you sort of said, hey, and formally ended it, they would kind of find that weird. There's other people who absolutely, if we've been in a text flow, or so I'm not saying that to disavow your experience, just to notice that there can sometimes be a little bit more of a spectrum there. But if I'm ghosting you, and let's say I'm on the end of the spectrum where we've actually had quite a lot of contact and we've gotten together and we've had several dates, and there's a real connection between us, and I ghost you, that's really my karma, right? And that might not be very satisfying to you in this moment because you're hurting, but just to realize in the fullness of time, this is kind of on them, right? It's like my ghosting you is my own mental illness in a certain kind of way. It's my own hurt, it's my own ego, it's my own lack of empathy, or it's my own cowardice sometimes. So yeah, so sometimes I've had people that after a time, when they've gotten over it and healed a bit, they can even find a place where they feel compassionate in a genuine way for the other person, because it's like, wow, you must be hurt in a way that you would actually go down that route, right? And so it might not actually be as choiceful. It might be there's a part of you that's kind of running the show. Jack, what's with all the friends with benefit and NSA going on, no strings attached going on with online dating right now? I deleted the apps because so few men seem to be looking for a relationship right now. You'd think given the pandemic. Yeah, I get it. I get it. All I'll say, because I've seen it on both sides of this, and I also sometimes study this stuff, there's more of this that is on both sides of the equation than I think maybe, say, like as a woman who's trying to date men, than you might realize. So I don't think it's just men, is what I'm saying. I also question the incentive structures of dating apps, because dating apps are optimized for monetization, I think, ultimately, or at least engagement and then monetization. And I think there's lots of behaviors that you can incentivize that have nothing to do with how can we form a deep and meaningful connection. And so I often think that when people on dating apps, and I've even observed this behavior in me previously, it's like, am I really in a space where I'm sitting down intentionally and thoughtfully looking to connect, or am I sort of a little bored and I want something to do right now, or do I feel a little lonely and this is going to like be a salve to my loneliness? So I also think a lot of the like energy that's coming into dating apps isn't necessarily like high quality energy, let's say. So yeah, I also think there's all kinds of people out there. So I wouldn't lose hope in that. If the dating apps isn't working for you, I would change your approach, try other things. Start participating in things if you can only do it online, but that are based around interests and sociability. Because I think some of those organic ways of making connections are still potentially the best. Yeah, I don't, I was in DC not so long ago, and Abraham Lincoln talked about the better angels of our nature. I'm not sure that dating apps appeal to the better angels of our nature, or that they were designed to do that. And I'm not saying that they're all in exactly the same bucket, but just in gross orienting generalization. So, yeah, some people find better with the apps where they have to make the first move, that there's less kind of unwarranted energy coming their way. Other people find that interest-based apps are actually a better way to make connections with people. But I hear you. I think I'll often emphasize to people, I don't want you to be a sociologist. Like, let's leave that to people who are sociologists, who, to analyze sort of what's happening at large in the field of dating and relating. And that you really need to focus on the individual, which is you with a desire. I want to find one person. So it doesn't matter if the gross orienting generalization is against what you want, if you can find the thing that you want. But I will just share, I am not sure that I like the direction of where we've gone with dating apps. I think that there's something more sort of authentic and wholesome that is hard to fully recreate there at times. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'm sort of sharing in your analysis. I wasn't allowed to have boundaries growing up. Now I'm in the process to reprogram this. Awesome. My default response is fear to speak up, to stand up for myself and opening up about my needs and feelings. Totally. Yeah, I can relate to that part of myself, and I know what that's like. So I love that you're stepping into that reprogramming, and I wish you all the best with it. It's really important work, and it's noble work, and you need permission to do that work, as in it might not happen overnight. It might be a long process of practice and maturation, and sometimes it's about just getting back on the horse and keeping practicing. And yeah, all the power to you. Hi, Jack. It barely happens that I feel attracted to a man, and I think I've never really been in love. Am I not open enough, or what could it be? Well, it could be, and I'm actually not, super au fait with all the different concepts and terms that are at large now, but I like this trend, where I see on people's profiles where they may say that they are demisexual, right? Or they may say they're pansexual, or just seeing that there's this like whole plethora of how people experience sexuality and attraction that I think historically we've had very little insight to. So I think at our best, generally, we trust our experience, which doesn't mean that we're not open to help and support and things that might change. But maybe it's okay that that you don't often feel attracted to someone. So we could look at that and say, okay, is there some kind of like diagnosable issue there? Or it could be that for you to feel attracted, there are certain conditions that need to be in place. And maybe those conditions are rarely in place, and maybe therefore you rarely feel attracted. So I would be curious about, are there any commonalities in your attraction experiences? I'll even say that historically for me, it could be confusing being around guys who are just very clearly, obviously, physically attracted to all sorts of women. And for me, it was like, if I've not really had any kind of connection, it's like that, it seems kind of superficial to me, and it doesn't seem to get my attention in quite the same way. Now this seems like the world is kind of caught up that actually there's lots of people that are like that, or you need to really look at someone in the eyes and experience a sort of soul connection. So anyway, I'm curious what flavors of that are there. I'm also curious if you are able to experience pleasure yourself in without the reference of a man, so your own connection to yourself, your own connection to your desire and pleasure, is that there, or is there something to learn about that or to explore with that? Said differently, this could be, it's like you've got a question, and I think this could be a really great question in service of some self-awareness to find out what's true for you here. Is it that there's anything that's blocking your desire or attraction? Are there any unmetabolized experiences that need to be more metabolized? Is there a dominant fear that if you allowed yourself to be more attracted, that you would be out of control, or someone might take advantage, or what's there? Obviously there could be different things. I would be curious for you to hold this with curiosity. Not so much like there's something wrong with me, more like, I'm curious to know more about this, and I'm going to treat myself well and gently as I make this exploration. The fear I'll be punished or abandoned if I set boundaries is still there, but I'm working on it. Yeah, totally. And it might just be that over time you can turn the volume down on that. That may always have a little bit of presence there in the background. I think those things are okay. I've known for me in the past, a fear of setting boundaries would be that someone might want to retaliate in some ways. Like, oh well, I've done them bad and now they want to do me bad or something like that. And I've had to just examine that and notice that that's rarely actually been true. It's more like it is an actual fear than one that's borne out in reality. If a guy just wants to text, does that mean he isn't interested? Well, in the sort of fullness of the definitions that I would say for a guy that wants a real relationship, yes, I would say that he's not showing us. It might not be that he isn't interested, but there's no evidence that he is interested. So it's like, if this were a court of law, there's nothing that we can prosecute here because we haven't actually got the evidence for it. And he sure isn't making an effort for it to be known that he wants something more. Sometimes you can just ask that sort of directly, like, I'm interested in more of a connection than texting, and I'm curious if you are. And really the question there becomes, do you want to go on a date? Do you want to take me out on a date? And often that is just clarifying. There's a whole bunch of guys in certain seasons of their life that they're just not going to be available to go on an actual date. And if you need and want that, it's like, that's a pretty good stop point. Again, this could be an example of where a guy might sort of be fussy with you, right? Or maybe, why can't you just be cool? Why can't you just enjoy that we like texting each other? And again, that can be a substitute for actually he's not really into more or is not available for more. And if he's taking up mental space for you that's preventing you from having more elsewhere, then, it's generally good to call that a zero and kind of move on. Because there are plenty of people, both men and women, who actually what they're available for, or part of what they're available for, is having a text relationship, connection. Maybe relationship's too strong a word. They like texting. That's fine. So it's almost like there's a pool of people that want to do that. Let them do that. I just think you're saying that you're not in that pool of people, and we're not trying to drag guys out of the texting pool. We don't go fishing in the texting pool. We just let it be. Thank you, Jack. I have more clarity in my choice. You're welcome. Just kind of scrolling through here. I'm a little behind. Half an hour behind. Oh my gosh. Jackie boy, gotta get moving. All right. Hi, Jack. How to survive in a situation that doesn't operate in the same vibe of communication? There's constant miscommunication and hard to send a message across. Sometimes there's just a limit to communication, right? It's certainly with certain people and with myself at times. So sometimes just realizing there is a limitation. Also realizing if it's really hard for us to communicate, it might just be that's not a good fit for trying to deepen a relationship, right? There's got to be probably some minimum effective dose of pitching and catching that works. I certainly know it's easy for me to feel frustrated if I'm not understood. I'm not necessarily, I love being understood deeply, but I'm not even talking about sort of nuanced and complex kind of emotional experiences and unpacking. Just if I want to order something in a restaurant and someone doesn't understand me, I'm not the most patient person in some ways. So I place a real value on that. And basically, I think it takes two people to tango, right? So if you're like, okay, we don't have great communication, but we love each other or we want to pursue a relationship and we're both committed to work in this, maybe we're going to get a therapist or a coach or someone that can help us. All the power to you. See how that goes. It may still be that there's a minimum effective dose that's not working for you, but it really it's going to take some energy and effort. And so if that's not there, you might just already have your choice, you know. Um, Hazel, Jack, something that I like about you is your sincerity and your insight. You're in tune with yourself. I can see that. Thanks. I appreciate that. Uh, doing my best. um, Five love languages, Gary Chapman. Yeah, that can be powerful even if you just look that up. Um, what if I've told him to contact when he's available and we sort his divorce? What if I've moved on and he contacts? Well, a couple of things. So one is we can't be in the business of predicting the future, right? So if I can get just mildly enneagrammatic on you for a moment, I am a head type. Probably about a third of you or more watching right now will be head types. We all have a tendency in our culture to want to lose presence to the future, right? Which doesn't mean that we should never think about the future. We just want to try and do it in as conscious a way as possible, right? So if we're going on a vacation, there's going to be a time where we might want to sit down and make some plans, book some things, draw up a budget. But we sort of do like a conscious planning session. So much of the time, and I'll just own this myself, I'm in unconscious planning. I'm fantasizing about a future that doesn't yet exist. And I'm not just talking about dreaming or envisioning, which can be very powerful. I'm sort of like, I'm doing something, but part of me is wandering to a future time and I'm imagining a conversation or a context or something. And it's not really like a problem I can solve right now. So I actually need to let the future unfold. So I'm saying that because it might be the part of your inner work is to not be ahead of yourself and not try and solve problems of the future that aren't really the business of the present. This, though, is also it's a problem that solves itself in the future. In that, if you have a guy reach out to you and you've really moved on, let's say you're in a relationship and it's going somewhere, then it's probably going to be thanks, no thanks, right? And if I, as a guy, am willing to let you go for some future cycle where I may want to pursue something, then I know that that's a sort of risk I take. And it might be true to me because right now I'm not a yes, or I'm not available, or I've got something I need to do first, or I've got, if I'm going through a breakup or a divorce or something that needs to be handled. But that's sort of, it's part of life. And I don't say that, unsympathetically, just life is like that. There's timing. Sometimes the timing works for two people. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes that's hard, but it's also sort of true in another way. Like there is a true thing to timing as well. So, what if I take a job and then I get a better job offer? It's sort of like, well, I have a choice. I can either be like, this is really unfortunate and I'm actually going to leave my job because when I tune in, this thing, I've got a shot at it. And even though I have a great job, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so I go for it. Or I say, that's really flattering and the timing could have been better and I'm actually doing okay in my job and I'm going to stay. Do you see what I mean? So I basically, I don't fear it. I don't fear my own discernment and guidance and decision making. I think this was a bigger problem back in the day for me, where if there was more than one thing that I might want to pursue, I would be very torn. And it's sort of like, but that's also a gift and a privilege to have even an option, right? Sometimes you don't have a job and a better job offer, you have no job, or you have, no even idea how to get a job. You know what I mean? So if you're in a connection and then a better connection or a different connection comes in, okay, or you might just say, yeah, that sailed, so a lot of life makes more sense in real time than it does ahead of time. Just scrolling here for questions. 1 year, 3 months relationship, and he still cannot open his heart to love me. He cares for me. I'm worn out. I love him, and I have to move on to take care of myself. Yeah. Sorry. I get why that would be difficult. Um, so you may have the clarity here. One thing that I would be curious about is, what does a guy mean when he says he cares for you? Is that really a way of saying, I'm not actually in love with you, or I don't love you, or I don't look at you in that way? Because if it is, that really is important information to act on. The thing I just want to make sure is, sometimes people and guys don't find it easy. Maybe it's not their love language, or maybe they didn't grow up a certain way. So just to sort of say, hey, I love you, isn't going to be the first thing out of them, but maybe they feel like they show it in all the ways that they show up. So just putting that out there in case that's of use. But I like that you're taking care of yourself. And I want for you to be in a relationship where it's mutual and the guy has that energy coming towards you. And I think that is possible. The avoidant I'm seeing has to leave the country for 6 months. He already is pulled away, but insists that he will be back and is futurized a lot. How should I continue to keep in touch with him? Yeah, well, I'm curious what stage of relationship you're at. Is that like a mutual, how should we stay in touch with each other? Ideally, let me give you another context. If I'm the guy in this situation and I have to leave the country for 6 months, if I'm clear that I want to be in an ongoing connection with you, I might set some potential desires down or parameters, right? Like, this is really unfortunate because I want to be building a relationship with you, but I don't know, my visa's going to be out for 6 months. So here's what I suggest, right? I want to talk to you at least, 3 times a week, or I want us to both be saving money so that, we have a flight fund. So as soon as the 6 months is up, we're going to fly to, some beautiful island and spend some time together. Did you get the sense? So in this orientation, and this is not the only orientation, but it's a useful orientation to try on. In the orientation of the guy's leading, what is the guy leading here? Is he giving you something that you can kind of lean into, or is there actually a sort of void and now you're having to do a lot of the lifting here? Because if you are, that could be useful information that he's actually not into it enough, that he's looking to secure something, particularly if he's already pulled away, right? There can be, I'm going to be away for 6 months, but I'm not pulling away. I actually am going to double down. There's another possibility. So the little I'm hearing here, and it is just a little, I'm not super psyched about the energy that you're getting from him. And so it might be that actually the best thing is you let him go live his life for 6 months, you do the same, and see where you're at. Maybe there's going to be some good information that comes for you, not trying to make something happen that he's actually not stepping into from his side. Sorry I'm late, lost in time in Brazil. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Ghosting's an awful way to treat someone. I get that. I like this. So I came to the same conclusion. I stopped blaming myself for his behavior. Yes. And if you can include the abandonment wound, I love this. So there's great awareness. I know this can be really still painful and difficult, but I love that you're including that here. And yeah, I don't think we can ask too much more. Julie, thank you, Jack, and everyone here. Got to go. Awesome. Thanks for being here. Jack, question. Why do married exes keep contacting you throughout their marriage that they claim to be miserable in but never get divorced? Well, in some ways it makes sense. So maybe not the bit about why do they never get divorced, but if I'm miserable in my marriage and there's something in our connection that I appreciate, that might be why I'm in touch. It may not be the best behavior. It certainly may not be the best behavior for my current relationship and partner. But I also have been in and around the development. I've been in and around human development pretty much my whole adult life. And, lots of times we'll put up with things that we don't like because we either can't or don't know how to change them, or we're not willing to be with the consequences of changing them. So in a way, I get the payoff of I'm not trying to fix my marriage, but I don't actually have to leave it. Or maybe I've just sort of defaulted to like, this is what it's going to be. Ideally, I would want that energy going into trying to find some resolution of either we're going to move this forward or we're going to not. But that's his gig, you know. So from your side, does it serve you to be receiving that? I don't think you would want to be wasting much energy on whether your ex is going to get a divorce. So I'm curious if there's any payoff in here for you. Are you imagining some future possibility of relating with him? Do you feel sorry for him? Do you get something from the connection? Is this connection helping you manifest what you want? That would be my curiosity. Where to find evolved, conscious, and growth-oriented men in the UK? Well, I don't know specifically in the UK. I will say, you know, what do conscious, evolved, growth-oriented men engage in? You know, maybe they engage in therapy. Maybe they engage in coaching. Maybe they meditate. Maybe they think about their diet. Maybe they are involved in a inner work or spiritual practice community. Maybe they write profiles that let it be known that they're oriented towards growth and they want a partner. Maybe they do men's work. Maybe they do things in the communities that they serve that are about growing themselves and other people. I mean, there's obviously no end of modalities of inner work, right? Whether it's polarity therapy, shadow therapy, Jungian psychotherapy, the Enneagram that I'm familiar with. There's all sorts of modes and modalities of growth, you know, so you maybe just notice the ones that resonate with you and see who hangs around in that space, you know, who runs those groups in the UK, where are those networks, where are the access points. I'm sure there's loads of stuff that's going on. It might just be a case of tapping into that world. You know, I've sometimes had this experience, not so much sort of in a dating context, but just where I've maybe started to become interested in something. And then as I start to delve into that world, I'm like, there's a whole world here. Why did no one tell me about this? So you might find that it's about finding any access point and suddenly that there's all sorts of, you know, I'm thinking of mushrooms, you know, mushrooms that connect beneath the earth in these kind of, what is it, rhizome sort of networks. You may just be getting into the first access point. You know, I'm sure they probably listen to podcasts. I'm sure they go to seminars or online courses in today's world. So, yeah. I totally agree with you on the subject of dating apps. Right on. How do you improve your self-worth? So have you seen my video? I think I've done 2 videos on this. And I think worth would probably be in the title. So if you just Google Jack Butler worth, I think it would come up. But it's on my YouTube channel if you just want to flick through. I did one in August of 2019, and I did another in either late 19 or early 2020. And one of them I shot indoors. One of them I shot, I think, when I was at the creek. But it's a fairly deep cut, so I would say go there first because I think it will do a better job than I do just in passing right now. I talk about something called non-contingent value, which is a little bit of a fancy phrase, but it's basically trying to break the cycle of I'm worthy because. It's almost like I am worthy, period. Rather than I'm worthy because I do these high value actions, or I'm worthy because men want to date me, or I'm worthy because I'm in a relationship, or I'm worthy because I left my relationship. It's not saying that those things aren't important. It's just there's this place to take aim at where it's like there's not this sort of ongoing referendum so much on my worth. It's more like I find the part of me that is true and authentic, or is not so invested in how other people need to see me, or I need to even see myself. Like the fullness of this path, and maybe there's, you know, maybe there's way territory beyond which I've gone, but as much as I know, is that actually I start to disidentify with my self-concept. Now, again, that's kind of a fancy phrase. It basically means I take less grip around who I am. So I allow that I might be lots of things. I allow that I have paradoxes and contradictions. I allow that how I see myself may be differently than how you see myself. I get that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I get that some people may not like me. I get that some people may reject me. I get that I may reject people and reject parts of myself. So it's almost like well, if I'm not trying to be a specific thing that I'm living up to, I'm already a bit better, right? Because I'm like, and it can also feel like a bit of a void, right? Well, if I've got nothing that I sort of specifically value, so I might hold certain parts of myself as I particularly like. I particularly like the way I do things, but there's also this like I just am. I'm a human. We're all worthy. We're all dignified. Whatever our path, that is the great equality that we're all living this kind of mystery without an instruction manual for most of us, and whether I'm the flavor of the month or I'm not, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm not looking to be anything other than that which I truly am. Not the wounds, not the old stories, not the outdated narratives, not the outdated strategies from childhood, not the restrictions of my personas, but the true essence of who I am. It is what it is, in the same way that a tree is a tree and a dog is a dog. I'm a person. I'm a unique person in time and history, and I have my beauty and my frailty all wrapped up, and it's sort of like that is what it is, and we could try and give that a scorecard, but it's almost like, I guess what I'm saying, once I fully tap into my own uniqueness, there's a sort of like, there's no real scorecard for that uniqueness because that is what it is. But check those videos out because they do a good job, I think. I got some good feedback on them. All right, I'm going to have to start talking faster. I heard that someone say dating apps bring back the courting process. Not sure about this. Yeah, I don't know. That hasn't been the experience that I have had or have heard from other people. But if that is happening, I kind of like that, like some reclaiming of some traditional things, but maybe in a more updated postmodern equality framework. I don't put men on pedestals. I just dig my hole next to them. Sorry, that made me smile. That's sad, but I almost, there's something that seems kind of self-aware about that. Yes, this is why uniqueness is the answer. Uniqueness is the answer to one up and one down. Uniqueness is the answer to superior, inferior. When I get that I'm unique and you're unique, I stop comparing. I don't suffer from negative self-comparison. I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. I'm not trying to make you something that you're not. Most people that have a sense of superiority are hiding a sense of inferiority, right? So you can't have it both sides of the equation. So it doesn't matter whether I'm feeling superior or inferior. In some ways, the solution's the same. We maybe have a little bit more trouble when we hold, when we do the I dig next to you, right? So when I'm one down, like we might think that's more of a problem, lower self-worth, so to be. But actually low self-worth and a certain form of high self-worth, I think are the same problem wrapped up in different ends of the spectrum. What are some interest-based apps to meet people? Well, not just since the Queen's Gambit, but I do play chess sometimes. So, on chess.com, you can maybe go meet some people, or let's say you're into fitness, you can have something like Strava, which is fitness. It's a route tracking, right? So it's like, here's where I've cycled recently, or here's where I've biked or walked. And there's a social component to it, or something like All Trails if you're a hiker, or sort of fill in the blanks to some extent where there's a social component where you can have a profile and you can comment, or you can have subgroups or threads of conversation. Particularly anything that's then also oriented to like shared experience in the real world, like we could play a game or we could go on the same hike. I think that's a great place to start to just be friendly with people. I know people that have gotten dates out of this stuff, but especially any group that has we come together for a course. Masterclass.com, they run lots of courses. Udemy runs lots of courses. Coursera runs courses. Meetups can be a great way of connecting with people. It's often about being the first person to say hello. Thank you, Jack. You're welcome. We finally met after 7 months of text calls. It was amazing. We're close and each respectfully. Has work, family issues, and can't commit for a while. Do I look elsewhere or wait? So I would say just flick back a bit earlier in this because I've talked to this little issue for a bit. I'm not a huge fan of waiting. I'm more of a fan of if you're available, give me a call. I'm going to live my life because it keeps you in your power. It's not like a screw you strategy. It's like if this isn't clear to you right now, that's fine. You have a right to your lack of clarity, but your lack of clarity doesn't mean that I'm going to be waiting. I think that's how it goes down. Hi Jack, help getting past the lie from my guy. I've chosen to forgive, therefore I need to move forward, but still scary and difficult. Totally. Yeah, I would support you to ask for what you need for that to really heal. And it might mean that you need to get in the room with someone else, right? Like a coach or a therapist. It might be that it's a series of conversations. It might be that it's going to be earned, right, through lived experience and actions that you observe. That's okay. I think if you've betrayed, it's sort of like sometimes you have to pay your penance. And I don't just mean that in a sort of harsh or moralistic way. Just I think that's sometimes how it works for it to be real that we have actually repaired, right? You're talking about repairing trust. So we don't want to shy away from what's real about that. All right. I'm getting stuck. What do we got? Whoever wants is always ready. There you go. I'm impressed how you find the words even to difficult questions or where the question is not clear because you have a certain amount of letters available. Thank you for your time and empathy. You're welcome. I'm happy. I'm happy for that reflection. If I've had a rougher life than a man, let's say, could that kill the feminine masculine balance between us? Curious what your experience is. I mean, something that might have happened, right? So, I mean, I'm just going to sort of project onto your question here. But I'm imagining if you had a rougher life, maybe you had to learn how to survive your childhood. I mean, we all did to some extent, but maybe you had to do that even more than some of us. And so part of what will have come online is your protector, right? So the one that's going to stand up for you, that's going to armor you and shield you against further pain. And sometimes what that is a masculine defense, right? I mean, it can also be a non-masculine style of defense, but let's say part of it, just for the sake of argument, could be that you know how to get tough and sometimes you keep your guard up. So that could impact the polarity. But I also think a guy has to understand that might just be part of the equation sometimes is that your protector's going to be there. The more you can reveal and talk to that and even acknowledge my protector's here right now, or, you know, when we argued yesterday, my protector was there, that can just be helpful language. If we have a shared reality that there's a part of you that protects you, just like there's probably a part of me that protects me, even if we have different strategies, yours might be more assertive, right? Or it might be that mine might be withdrawn. You know, I've definitely had a withdrawn defense at times. So I think it's all going to dissolve in the light of awareness. You know, I don't mean that in a trite way. Just the more you can talk to it, reveal it, be friends and partners around a particular thing, then I think that's going to help. I always say, you know, at our best as guys, we don't just have a right to your feminine essence, right? By which I mean we may have to work to help create the container or to build the trust or to create the sensitivity that might draw that out. And so it's okay sometimes if you have a shield. You know, it's both our jobs to help relax that. But I wouldn't let your past define you in that way. I think lots of things can be possible there, and even just explaining to someone, you know, his reality of what I had to learn to do. Right, I had to learn that when, who knows, Dad came home drunk, I had to learn how to very quickly ascertain how drunk he was and how safe I was or wasn't, and I had to protect my younger siblings, and I also was looking out for my mum. You know, you fill in the blanks, but there's going to be versions of that where that strategy to learn quickly how to protect myself, or maybe even to say something that's not fully true, but it deflects a certain comment that allows me time to do something. I mean, we all have subtle or gross ways that those things are set up, and part of our journey into our wholeness and back home is that we learn how to relax that stuff, and you know, it takes work, and sometimes it takes a willingness from someone else to help, you know. What country do you live in? The United States. Husband works too much in another city. He took this new job. He's faithful and trustful, but communication is scarce. I'm tired of his lack of time. Had to change plans, but I'm not happy. Yeah, I get that. That sounds tough. Yeah. Sometimes it can be good to have an honest conversation between you about what what money means, right? So sometimes there can be a thing where a guy is kind of like working hard to support, him or you or the family. And there's sort of like such a, provide and protect mentality that in that view, a lot of sacrifices and connection are worth it. But I think often as a woman in relationship, those sacrifices might look different. So I think just being on the same page is much easier if we're both acknowledging we are making a sacrifice, because then the work I'm putting into the sacrifice shows up in your bank balance, so to speak, emotionally. But if it doesn't, we may need to have a hard conversation about that. Maybe we're willing to downshift our lifestyle, or maybe if you have to work away, it's not going to be full time, or it's a very time limited season, or actually the money that we are going to spend is going to be spent on making sure we can spend more time together. An interesting topic to also discuss would be about people like myself who have a life-threatening illness and how to find the courage to go out there, meet someone, and then have to tell them. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I'm a fan of realness wherever that's possible, because I think that the right person to connect and partner with you is going to get this about you, and it's actually not going to be a problem. It might be that there are sacrifices and there are things we just can't do, or there's frameworks of time and runway that we don't have, but I think we're all precious, and so whatever our physical capabilities, our wellness, our illness, it's like it all transcends that in my view. And that doesn't mean there aren't practical considerations. And not everyone sees it that way, but I think there are people that see it that way, and that's going to be the best place for you to play ball. Take time to grieve, forgive him and yourself, it will get better. All right. Having been in a marriage with a narcissist before, I'm carrying a fear that my boyfriend will turn out to be a different person than he seems, and he will turn on me as my ex did. There is no evidence of this after 11 months. How do I release this fear? Yeah, great question. So I think I would encourage you to own that fear and actually reveal it into the connection. Because then it's like we can share in this, like we can share in it, rather than I just sort of hold it back there, but it's perhaps influencing the way that I look at this situation. Sort of vulnerability as strength. And maybe it also allows you guys to both pay attention to what's important for you. What are you having to track? Maybe there's some vigilance that you can learn to relax a little bit, because actually, he can show up in a certain way, or he can kind of support those fears with you. Thanks, Jack. Listening to you and watching your videos helps me stay on track, finding my best match for me. Awesome. Jack, what's the appropriate way to tell a man you are not happy with inconsistent communication and would like to meet more often without sounding too clingy or insecure? I would say that as directly and as kindly as you can. Here's what I'm looking for in a relationship. Here's what's important to me. Because would it not be true to say that this is important to you irrespective of him, right? So I sometimes talk about personal and impersonal. And what I mean by that is there are things that are personally important, just in the same way that a guy can be ready or not for a relationship impersonally to you, right? You probably know this. You've met guys where you're like, yeah, he's still in the Peter Pan phase, right? So it doesn't really matter which woman would connect with him. He's not really going to want something serious. And then there are guys who are like, yeah, I'm ready for something serious. And if you meet a guy and the connection's there, that's a great time to meet him. In the same way, for you, consistent communication is important. I think the way is that you own your needs. That's the way to not be clingy or insecure. And by the way, I'm not so down on clingy and insecure as I think some people are. I think it's a little bit of an extension of our sometimes overly individualistic culture. I'm insecure at times. I'll just own it. I am insecure at times. I'm not necessarily the most insecure person you'll ever meet, but there are times where I can be insecure. So I'm a human, kind of deal. Now, maybe at my best, I don't blame you for my insecurity. Maybe I own my insecurity. Maybe that's sometimes hard for me to do. But that's where I would focus. Like, you have a right to your insecurity, so to speak. We just don't want to be in the game, ideally, of blaming other people. Or we want to be able to tell them, hey, when you did this thing, it had this impact over here. Could you make a modification, or could we talk about it? So, inconsistent communication isn't going to probably just become consistent unless there's a clear conversation, and he then has a chance to say, is that what he wants? It might be that that's not going to work for him, and it's actually a bit of a deal breaker. But I would love for that to be a real conversation rather than a sort of, I'm surmising that you're not available for this because you never made yourself available, or he doesn't get that actually how much you value that. And what does consistent, I would have a definition of consistent communication that you can quantify, even if it slightly corrupts the concept. But what do you mean by that? Do you mean a maximum of a number of hours that I get back to a text message? Do you mean that we see each other in person or on a phone call a number of times a week? Try and put a little bit of that, and then say, does that sound good to you? Because for the right guy, that's going to sound good, not just like, oh yeah, well, I guess I could do that for you. It's like, actually, I'm probably into that. Like, yeah, I want to connect with you, right? That's the ideal thing, is that the guy wants to connect with you. All guys pull away at certain times, I think. Not just guys, but typically guys. Again, I've done videos on that. But let's get to the truth. Let's get to the truth of this. Do you want to be in a relationship with me or with someone where you actually hang out for this amount of sort of time, Because if you kind of don't, this kind of probably isn't a great fit for us, and we should probably be talking about that before we invest more energy. I'll be moving to school in about 1.5 to 2 years. It's about 8 hours away. I've been dating a guy for almost 2 months, and his behavior's been inconsistent. If I were staying, I'd definitely end it. But wondering if friends with benefits would be an okay option until I move. Yeah, I mean, you have your choice. You have your choice. But, you're talking about 1.5 to 2 years. So a lot can happen in 2 years. So if you're clear that you actually want to be in a relationship, then maybe you downshift that. Or maybe you say, you know what, I'm actually willing to stay connected to you, but I'm just going to be honest, I'm going to be dating and I'm looking for something that's more serious. And then at least we're kind of transparent. But sometimes when we get certain needs met, I am also a fan of clearing the field if you want a relationship. Because then you can marshal your energy for the thing that you most want. But, you can also try it on. Sometimes if you meet someone that you're more serious about, the friends with benefits just kind of falls away anyway, right? Because like the real thing is on the cards. How to ignore a crush at work who flirts, but we work closely together. Yeah, this can be difficult. It's difficult to either stay permanently unfeeling or to stop flirting back, but it is confusing considering changing jobs. I get it. So I'm curious if you've ever named what you actually feel, right? Is there a reason that this couldn't go somewhere? Like maybe they're in a relationship. But I think just the vulnerability, because sometimes what is a flirt for one person is actually like, I have kind of like feelings in this, and it may be vulnerable for me to reveal that, but at least we're now clear that there's an impact in my world. So this isn't just casual flirting. Sometimes to honor your heart and highest path, you do have to change something like offices, jobs, roles. And sometimes, it can feel difficult to come to that, but I've seen it where that can be really important. But I also like being straight with a guy, because let's look at it this way. If I'm in my heart and I care about you and I like flirting with you, but I can't be in a relationship with you either because I'm with someone else or I don't see you that way. And I get that I'm actually having this kind of like, it's fun, but it's also a bit of a negative impact in your world. If I really care, that means something. If I don't care, then you're not really anything to me anyway. And so why should you continue to engage with me, right? There's probably plenty of places, if you want to flirt, you can probably go on Tinder and figure that out if you need to, right? So that's the way that I look at it, is your heart's precious. And so, it's kind of, we lead with that. Joe, all you say, Jack, is so helpful. You're welcome. I'm happy to hear that. He did tell me that he loved me but needed time and told me to get on with my life. Got it. It's good to take a guy at face value when he says that, I think, even if it's difficult. Great way to put it. I'm doing all the lifting with the communication lately and I feel a void on their end. Totally. Great advice, Jack. Thank you. You're welcome. Especially liked your last sentence. I'm curious to know more about this and I'm going to treat myself well and gently as I make that exploration. Awesome. Yeah, I kind of like that. You have to try and understand their childhood, also where they're coming from. Yep. Jack, do you agree that our beliefs create everything we experience in life? I don't major in beliefs. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of the personal growth field that beliefs is a lot of what they talk about, right? Limiting beliefs, self-limiting beliefs, how to change beliefs. And, obviously there is territory there that's important. But I'm more of a phenomenologist. I can't even say the word. but it's fancy. But what I mean by that is my starting point usually is what's your experience? And even people who know me well can kind of joke about this because it can be a bit of a boring question sometimes. Hey, what's your experience? But that's where I start typically. So what are you feeling? What are you sensing in your body? Yes, also what are you thinking? But how should I say this? I think beliefs is part of the curriculum, and then there may be further stages of the curriculum that are a little less magnetized towards beliefs. And certainly this idea that we create everything, it depends what consciousness that's being held in. So yes, at some level, my experience is highly subjective, right? So that could be like, yeah, even the way that you occur to me is going to be highly subjective based upon some of the things I think, believe, my past experiences. But I also think there's a kind of consciousness that we could call the creator consciousness that goes most comfortably with this way of thinking, which is, yeah, you create your reality. So like change your beliefs, change your reality. That's a partial truth. There's something incredibly powerful in that. But there's also something really powerful about surrender, and not that I'm just trying to create everything through shifting my beliefs. So, to take that to sort of ad absurdum, right? You could taste chocolate, and I could probably help you change some beliefs so that the way that you taste it is kind of different. But I'm actually more interested in tasting chocolate. I'm more interested in direct experience, non-conceptual, unmediated experience. So I've been a bit more on that track, which is like, I could say it differently. The people who most major and talk all the time about changing beliefs, I don't personally feel such a strong resonance with their worldview. And so I'm more interested in where are the people I resonate with their worldview, and then kind of like, what is that worldview? That's probably the way that I go into it. I'm not interested to be God in my own life, in the sense that everything I can just create and change all the time. Sometimes I think there's a bit of a poverty of experience that underpins that. Or it's the stage of development, and there maybe are other stages of development where actually what I can create is just less interesting. Kind of like I could say, hey, look at this movie, and we could manipulate or change certain of your beliefs about the movie, but I also just want you to watch the movie and say, what is your experience of the movie? And in some ways, the movie is your life, right? There's a divinely unfolding, I think, even without a particularly strong spiritual or otherwise framework. There's something that's unique that is unfolding in you across time, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in your uniqueness, your path, and sure, sometimes there might be some blocks on the way, but a lot of that is actually getting out of our head, I think, and into our direct experience, into the body, into our hearts, and I get excited about that. 2053. Oh my gosh, I'm still half an hour behind. Oh, the titles of the books you recommended. Well, someone said that they recommended Getting the Love You Want, and I said yes. So that is a Harville Hendrix and his partner Kelly LaHunt. I'm missing the second bit, but I have a video. If you just look on my channel, you'll find that video where I did a little book review, and you can also find that book right there. I love all this support that you're giving each other. I appreciate that. Wow, that's very true with the defensive group created from out of life experience on point, Jack. You're welcome. Hi, Jack, tuning in from Reno, Nevada. Welcome. Remember going to Reno? No, I remember being in the Alps as a teenager in the French Alps as a last-minute replacement for my friend's father who couldn't go on a holiday, and I'd never been to the Alps. I don't ski. I still don't ski, but I got a non-skiing place. And the people that we were in our chalet with were all from Reno, Nevada. And then several years later, I would be driving the long road trip from Colorado to California, and there was Reno, Nevada. It was kind of fun. Thank you for answering and giving me encouragement. Rebecca, you're welcome. Hi, Carol from Florida. Welcome. Great talk as always. Thank you. Thank you. Liked your Jordan Peterson talk too. Awesome. Thanks for checking that out. That's a sort of a bit of some new territories. I'm going to be trying pushing into some new video territories. I'm also going to be trying to do some more dialogues with people. So if there's anyone that you guys think I would really like their perspective or their work, or you would really like to see me interview or dialogue with someone, let me know. Put it in the comments because I'm curious if you've got ideas. reprogram negative beliefs about self and others is work with big rewards. Yes, I think that is also true. Paradoxically, I know it's not very ladylike, but I love watching The Hub. Mother, daughter, stepsister. I love it. Awesome. Um, how to react best way for myself when had beautiful soul connection night or both. Then out of the blue, the guy just leaves without a word. Why would a guy do this? Well, um, I don't know specifically. I do know that sometimes there can be very, connected experiences that don't necessarily register in his or someone's world as I want this to continue. It might just be it's a standalone thing. Sometimes if there's a really strong emotional or sexual connection, sometimes that can almost be like you hit a guy's max. Sometimes it can just be that for whatever reason, he likes the connection, but he doesn't see it as something that's investable or that he's in a time in his life to invest. And so sometimes knowing that, he doesn't actually want to put more energy in, and that can be completely selfish. There can also be a part of that which is for both people's benefits, because it's like if I know maybe we have a great connection in certain ways, but I can just honestly say I don't see us being a prospect. In some ways, it would be great if I could say that, but that's also kind of can be hurtful, So sometimes the lack of follow through is sort of like the proof of, this, I don't see this going somewhere. And that's also where just really getting that you and I are having different experiences, even if it feels really connected, unless you know intimately and truthfully what my experience is and how that experience relates to my desire to stay connected, it can be easy to miss that we might be having slightly different experiences at times. So it's always just good to make minimum assumptions. Even if I'm like, wow, this feels so amazing, connected, whatever, just I might have a little bit of space there for, and what's your experience? It's the old question. It's not sexy, but there's something really powerful about it. Wow, fascinating. Loving your opinion with all your knowledge on personal development since you encourage us to step in authenticity. Yeah, you're welcome. There might be more for me to put out in videos about that, because I have been in and around this for best part of 2 decades at this point, and it's really the only territory that I've ever worked in. So sometime I might have to go and get a real job. Don't tell my parents. But a lot, because I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of things, I used to sometimes struggle with, I can't really make sense of this. There's something that's appealing about it, but also the way that these people are talking, there's something that I'm also aversive in my experience. And so it took me a while. And basically what really helped me is getting into the integral world, the integral development, integral philosophy. And that can be complex. And, I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying to read the books, but it started to me to make sense like, oh, okay, there are different worldviews. There are different ways of experiencing reality. The self goes through stages of development. Selfhood doesn't look the same stage. And then having enough experiences in my life to be like, yeah, I haven't just gotten a bit older. I am a different self in the preoccupying focus that I have than I was as a self back in, 5 or 10 years ago. And that's just the thing. And I couldn't have seen it going forward. And it's kind of what it is. So it's given me a little bit more like, okay, I get it. There's a bit more of a tapestry here. And I think we all like to think our thing is kind of the thing and it would help all people. I think there's huge amounts of subjectification that happen in the personal growth space. The sort of simple worldview that says something like, because I had this change, you can have this change. And that may or may not be true. What I love about that in its purest form, I even heard like a pro boxer say this the other day. It's like, I know that if I can be a pro boxer, you can be a pro boxer. And there's, in a way that's like the role model energy, right? And there's something very humble and inspiring about that. I love that. But as a teacher or a coach or any of us that are in the business of supporting or giving advice, I think there also can be a humility that says, just because I did this doesn't necessarily mean you can or can't. It might be that we're in very different paths. We might have completely different archetypes. We might have completely different attachment styles. We might have completely different upbringings. We might have completely different cultural contexts. We might have completely different levels of development and worldview. Or it might be that in this particular domain, you're actually more advanced than I am. So you need a PhD curriculum and I'm still teaching elementary or secondary school. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way towards myself. It's just there are going to be a subsection of people for whom the things that I put out into the world are going to find resonance. And there's going to be a lot of people for whom they just don't. And I think that's okay. So it gets me more interested in the sort of the nuance of the tapestry rather than these sort of very broad approaches of like, this is what development is, this is how human beings develop. And quite often, what that can be is a hero persona in a particular coach or teacher that they're now projecting on other people. That's a limited view of development, I think. And we all probably do that in subtle ways. But if that's the main idea, is I really know what everyone's development is before I've even interacted with them as an individual, I think, buyer beware. That's my sense. Um, that's a great idea. Conversation between Richard Grannon would tickle me to death. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know him well. I think he's a Brit and he's a kind of philosopher. I have come across him. I'm curious if you follow him or how much you've connected to him. Proceed with caution. I'd love to see you and Jordan Peterson have a chat. Yeah, that would be fun. I might have to work hard to keep up with that guy. He seems to have a very fast-moving mind. I'll just have to accept that because I understand what you mean. Thank you. Lewis Howes. Yeah, he seems like an upbeat guy. There's a sort of genuineness to his enthusiasm that I appreciate. Love to see you talk with him. Definitely Jordan Peterson, controversial in some areas, but genuine genius regarding intimate relationships. Yeah. Interesting for you and Dylan James to chat. I must admit, I don't know who that is. Sorry if that's sort of an obvious mishap, but let me know. Feel free to link their channel as well, so I'm make sure I'm approaching the right person. Tim Ferriss, yeah, I've liked Tim Ferriss's stuff for a long time, and I've also enjoyed his journey into what seems to me like deeper levels of sort of realness and authenticity from clearly an amazing mind, but sort of the other aspects of him. So awesome, guys. I like it. Keep those things coming. If you're watching after the event, feel free to add to the main comments under the section. And hey, we've had a great group here. Thanks for all these questions. I'm happy that I got through them. I've really enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to being with you live again soon. Give us a like if you haven't. And as always, I'm Jack, and thanks for being here. Kristen Neff, awesome. I'll remember that as well. Thank you. All right, you all. Good luck, good night, good evening, and I'll see you soon. Take care.